Thank you once again for being here. Today's forum, Top of the Ticket, Ohio's governor's race, is featuring Anita Rios and is made possible through the support from the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation and Hannah News Service and Columbus Dispatch. Will you please help me in thanking our sponsors today for their support? We're pleased today to welcome a mother, a wife, an active and outspoken and dedicated citizen of the state of Ohio. Please join me in welcoming Ohio's Green Party candidate for governor, Anita Rios. And I'll add our able and wonderful moderator, Carol Luper, and Carol will come back when Anita has finished her remarks. So let's welcome Anita.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who has come out today. Thank you to the Metropolitan Club. I want to particularly thank the activists of the Green Party who have made this campaign possible by doing the impossible and getting us on the ballot through a write-in campaign in the primary. In particular, I want to thank my running mate, Dr. Robert Fitrakis. Later on this evening, I am going to be in Cleveland at the City Club, and I'm going to be debating Ed Fitzgerald, who is the Democratic candidate for governor. I believe that it is a sad commentary on the state of politics that Governor Kasich has refused to join us. But I just want to say that despite the fact that he will not be there on the stage with us, we are not going to forget that the impact that his policies have had on women, on workers, and on our communities. Like many Americans, I believe that the political system is very broken in this country, and in this state in particular. Last year, Ohio State Legislature passed a law that eliminated all minor parties in Ohio. That eliminated the Green Party, eliminated the Socialist Party, the Constitutional Party, and the Libertarians. We went to court. We fought back. We won that lawsuit, and our party status was reinstated. But that was pretty late in the game for us, and by that point, it was virtually impossible for us to get our candidates on the ballot in the normal way by petitioning. So what we did was we launched a write-in campaign, and what we had to do was get 500 people to come out and vote for us, and that does not sound like it should be all that difficult. But considering that in Ohio's 88 counties, we had Green parties on the primary ballot on but a handful of those counties. So most of those counties, what we were asking people to do was to pull a blank ballot and then write in our names. But we succeeded in doing that. It was a daunting task, but we succeeded. And that is how Robert Fitrakis and I ended up being candidates on the ballot and standing before you today. So to maintain party status, we have to get 2% of the vote. And that is an important goal for this campaign, but it is not the only reason that we are doing this campaign. We think it is very important to begin a political discussion that talks about the real issues, that does not talk about that does not consider the polls when it talks about the real issues, but actually goes to the communities in Ohio, understands what is happening, faces those issues, and comes up with real, concrete, tangible, doable, grassroots organizing answers. So what Bob Fitrakis and I are committed to doing is we are committed to putting an end to fracking. We will use all the tools and resources of the governor's office to do that. We will seek clemency for the Lucasville 5. We will put an end to the death penalty. We will focus our efforts on bringing down the cost of higher education, but at the same time, also, while we make it more accessible to go to college for young people, we also want to make it less necessary. We know that there are other ways of passing on knowledge to this next generation, of making our next generation of Ohioans entrepreneurs and skilled craftsmen and artistic entrepreneurs, people who will contribute to their communities and grow their communities because they care about their communities. For too long, the only method for bringing jobs to Ohio has been to grant tax abatements, to give money to the large corporations who, in the end, have done a very, very good job of enriching themselves. They have brought us some jobs, but are those jobs living wage jobs? Are those jobs that someone can raise a family on? Are they jobs that provide health care? All too often, the answer is no. And when we see the very, very minimal job growth that we have had here in Ohio, not reflected in the rates of poverty in this state, I have to believe that that is not the way we need to grow our economy. We need to grow our economy in a way that empowers workers to be job creators, and that's not rocket science. There are workers who use their wonderful skills to start manufacturing, to restart manufacturing in many Rust Belt towns. They're doing it in Chicago and in Detroit and even here in Cleveland, and we need to do more of that. We would also work to create a single-payer health care system. The notion of having health care, a for-profit industry, doesn't work for our communities. And if we look at what has happened with this Ebola scare, to me, one of the underlying issues of that is that our community health care systems are broken. They are fragmented. They are not systems that are the same across states, across communities. So that fragmented healthcare system has meant that some people have a good understanding of how to deal with a healthcare crisis, and some systems don't, as we saw in Texas. And we need to level that playing field. We need to have one uniform healthcare system. So in addition to that, we feel that healthcare should not be tied to employment. Healthcare should be something that all Ohioans have from cradle to grave. It's recognized as a human right in most places in this world, but not here in the United States. We are the wealthiest country on this planet, and we spend more on health care than anybody else on this planet, and yet we do not have 100% of our citizens covered. And that's deplorable, it's unacceptable, and it's not necessary. Another issue that Bob and I have faced head-on is the war on drugs and the legalization of marijuana. We think that is a very important conversation to have. We don't want to have that conversation because we are potheads. We want to have that conversation because we care about what is happening to our communities. We don't want young people to be hampered by a criminal justice system that taints them as felons, that precludes them from being able to get student loans, that marks them for the rest of their lives. We also don't want communities to have to bear the staggering cost of incarcerating more and more nonviolent offenders. Lastly, I would like to put every single drug dealer out of business. I would like to tax and regulate the sale, the production of marijuana. That is a whole underground economy that would help us all out, that would help by contributing to our communities. And yes, there are substance abuse problems. There are substance abuse issues. For many years, I was a mental health case manager, and my specialty was working with people who had a mental illness and a substance abuse problem. Those people weren't criminals. They were victims oftentimes of a system that did not have enough beds for them if they needed treatment, that did not have enough beds for them if they needed mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment, and that is the way to handle that. The criminal justice system is not the place where we deal with substance abuse issues. It is not the place where we deal with mental health issues, but it has become that place, and we have to do better than that. We can do better than that. Lastly, I would say here in Ohio, it is time for us to recognize gay marriage. to allow people to marry the people that they love, it's a no-brainer. Its time has come. We need to do that. So in short, I believe that we can use government to for social justice. We can use government to create communities that are strong and that take care of their own people. And I don't think that that is a bad use of tax dollars. I think growing and strengthening our communities is exactly what we should be doing with our tax dollars. Lastly, I just want to share a little bit about myself, about my own story. I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio. My parents are settled out migrant farm workers. I am one of 8 children. I was raised in deep poverty in Toledo, Ohio. And eventually my father got a job at the Jeep plant. He became a UAW member. And that is what created the American dream for me. That's what made the American dream real for me. I and 4 of my siblings graduated from the University of Toledo. My brother graduated from the University of Dayton. My older sister and my brother are both attorneys. That is the American dream. I have been married for 33 years to my husband, who is a former union steward. As I said, I worked as a mental health case manager for many years, and I was the head of that union local for SEIU 1199, and I negotiated a couple of contracts. And that's sort of what's got me started in politics, because as I was negotiating those contracts, what I was seeing is that the people, my clients, the people that I was working with, were having less and less. It was becoming harder for me to find them beds in substance abuse treatment facilities, or even on mental health wards in the hospitals. So I was seeing the money drying up for resources for the clients, but I was also negotiating those contracts for the workers. I was seeing money drying up there as well. And so I started asking myself the question, so who's the bad guy here? And I guess as I've lived my life, I have come to the conclusion that I never sit across the table from an enemy, regardless of what that person's point of view is, regardless of who that person is. You're all my fellow human beings. So it was very hard for me to look at the people who were negotiating that contract across the table and consider them enemies. So I started following the money, and what I looked at was where we allocate funding in the healthcare system. So that got me into politics, because I realized that we have policies, we have standards, we have systems in place that nobody asked us about. They're just how we do things. And if you question why do we do it that way, all too often the answer is that's just how we do it, or that's how it's always been done. Those are dangerous notions, and we are here to debunk those notions. I am here to debunk those notions, and I hopefully will offer other solutions, practical, doable, human solutions to some of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. And you've answered some of my questions, but I'm interested, you worked so hard to get on the ballot, and you're there. What do you hope to accomplish in the election and in the time running up to the election? What was your point in getting on the ballot?
Okay, my point for getting on the ballot was, as I said, I think that the two-party system has failed. I think it's failed to bring enough people to the table. I think we've created a kind of an artificial mainstream in politics that I don't think reflects the mainstream in our communities. So I hope that what this does is it opens a door for the Green Party, for Green Party candidates who come in the next election cycle, but for third parties in general, and honestly for democracy. I want people to look at this campaign and say, I can do that too, and I'm going to do it.
What about an expectation of winning Is that anywhere on your horizon?
Well, we always hope. There's always a hope of winning. Whether it's an expectation, I would not go that far, but our winning means that we reach that 2%, and we absolutely expect to do that, that we reach that 2% that is going to keep us on the ballot as a political party. And that is important because it allows us to count ourselves. It allows us to strengthen, to grow, and it allows us to get our candidates on the ballot more easily.
Your 10 key values are very important. They're things that I would guess every American would say, well, yeah, I would hope. Tell me what the top priorities are in your values.
Well, you know, when I came to the Green Party, I come from a very working class background, and as I said, I'm a former union steward. My husband's a former union steward. My father's a former union member. So I come up from a very working class background, and my third party was the Labor Party. I felt like that was my natural home. But the Green Party runs candidates consistently, and since I came to the Green Party, we have run candidates in every single election cycle, and I think that is very important. So when I looked at those 10 key values, the ones that connected most with me were social justice and the environment. And linking those together, I believe, is crucial and important because you cannot have social justice without considering what is the impact that we human beings have on our natural environment. And you can't protect the natural environment without considering what does this do for human beings.
One of the points you all make is Greens have the courage and independence necessary to take on the powerful corporate interests. How do you do that?
I think that it's not that hard to do. I think you do that by being honest and telling the truth and talking about what happens to communities when you give tax abatements, what happens to communities when they're not able to build infrastructure because these corporations are bad corporate citizens. In my hometown of Toledo, and I just want to give a shout out to Toledo. I love Toledo. It is where I was born and raised, and I would not live anyplace else. So I am dedicated to growing our Rust Belt communities, and right now we're under threat. We were just told by the president of Fiat that they might not build the next generation of Jeeps there, and that's shameful. That's shameful. That man has less connection to Jeep than we there in Toledo. However, because he runs that corporation, he has greater say on that. And I think that that's a formula that's wrong. And I would love to see workers take control of their own economic futures.
Violence is in the news all the time in every city. And you say you will take a preventative approach to nonviolence. What steps do you take?
Well, I live in the inner city. It's the historic district, it's a lovely neighborhood, but it's the inner city. And every day I see young people in the streets, you know, with their baggy pants. And I know, I talk to them. I'm a busybody, and I care about my community. So sometimes, you know, they're blocking my car or something, and I'll roll down my window and I'll say, hey. But I engage them, and sometimes they talk to me too. And you know what I see is a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and we need to nip that in the bud. We need to give them something. We need to give them investment in our communities. By doing that, that gives them something to lose. Right now, we've taken that all away from them, and they don't have anything to lose. So I think that's how we grow community. And I look at gangbangers, and I look at what they do, and I think on one level, it's heinous, and on another level, it's remarkable entrepreneurship and community building. If we can turn that, to a greater good and to an investment in our broader communities, that would be so wonderful.
You also have as a goal to lower the cost of higher education. That's a big one.
It's a huge one, but I think that, and I say this kind of tongue-in-cheek, but kind of it's the truth also, I'm sad that Gordon Gee resigned as president of Ohio State, because I would have wanted to fire him. I would have wanted to fire the presidents of all the public universities in this state, because they are drawing some very large paychecks, while it has become increasingly difficult for students to just walk in those doors. When I went to college, I graduated with less than $10,000 in student loan debt, and I had no money. I made it through college on Pell Grants and Ohio instructional grants. So when my sons went to college trying to do that as well, those grants that covered all of my tuition covered just a very small portion of their tuition. So we have to change that formula. I think that we have to stop looking at our higher education system as just another factory, or just another for-profit corporation. I think it's too important. There's too much riding on it, and we need to be able to impart knowledge to anybody who wants it.
You talked about marijuana and legalizing marijuana, and that taxing it would bring in money and would take it out of the underground. Have you researched how the states, I know Washington and Colorado, have legalized marijuana? Is it doing what you say it would do for Ohio for those states?
Those are very, very new. I would not look at what they know about the systems they've set up. There have been roadblocks in many of those states. I think it is doing what I believe it should do, but not to the extent that I believe it could. But they're very isolated states. There's just 2 of them right now. But I think that Ohio, being kind of a bellwether for the entire country, if we were to do that, I think the impact on it, on the whole system of developing a whole economy around it, I think we would have a far greater impact on doing that.
You also support gay marriage and marriage equality. Ohio is one of not many states who have not gone along with that. There are a number of states that have gone along with that. How would you get that through the legislature?
Well, honestly, and I'll be totally frank with you, I don't hold a lot of hope in what the legislature is going to do. I think this is going to come from the people. I think it's already showing up in polls that most Ohioans favor gay marriage now. Maybe they didn't back when we passed that amendment that precluded gay marriage. However, times have changed. I think that movement will come from the people in communities doing the right thing. Secondly, I think it's going to come from the courts. We're waiting for the ruling from the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals there in Cincinnati. And I think they will do the right thing and outlaw Ohio's unjust bias law.
You don't care for the current system of voting in this country, and you talk about instant runoff voting. Explain that.
Okay, instant runoff voting is an issue that the Green Party takes up frequently in order to dispel the fears that people have about being spoilers. But just like any other political party, we are not uniform we don't all march to the same drummer or have the same beliefs, and instant runoff voting is not something that I am very keen on. I don't mind being a spoiler. I think that there is strength in spoiling at times. And I think that when you have that kind of power, sometimes you can create dialogue with the other entities in the system, and that gives you some leverage to do that. So instant runoff voting, of course, what that does is it enables everybody to be on the ticket, and the people at the very top of the ticket usually go on to the next round, but it's not a solution that I would particularly favor.
You you use the term spoiler. How do you feel about this gubernatorial election And do you consider that you will take votes away? And is that being a spoiler, and is that a valid thing to do?
I think, well, just to define spoiler a little bit, let's just say that a candidate who comes into the race who does not have a good shot at winning but is able to swing a lot of voters to their side is considered a spoiler. However, I think that I have more respect for the voters than to consider their vote a foregone conclusion. I think that each voter is able to make their decisions for themselves in each election cycle. So somebody who was a Democrat in one election cycle can become a Republican in the next one, depending on who they like and who's on the ballot. But I think that our political system is one where we have armed camps and we don't talk to each other. And I think that's wrong. And I don't like that. I think that more often than not, we have common ground. We may not agree on strategies, but I'll bet you can get the most radically liberal person in the room with the most radically conservative person in the room, and their basic goals are going to be the same, is to, do good by our communities and do good by our young people. We won't disagree on the basic goals. We may disagree on some of the particulars and some of the strategies. So I think it is important that we come together more often, that we dialogue about solutions, that we find real answers. And when I say I don't mind being a spoiler, I don't mind representing a certain point of view that the electorate has, who wouldn't vote for me if they didn't have that point of view. I think that those are voices that should be heard, and I am happy to represent them.
Imagine yourself in the governor's office. What would you do first, second, and third?
First, second, and third would be to go to the people. To go to the people and find the experts in doing all of the programs that I would like to put in place. Nobody governs in a vacuum. Nobody governs alone. You find the experts. You find the people who are doing the wonderful things that you know must be done. And you create a cabinet. You create a cabinet of knowledgeable activist people. But secondly, because I am a person who comes from humble means and has a very humble way of living, I don't think I would require the salary that the governor takes. I have given this a lot of thought. I would create internships with probably at least 50% of that salary. Internships for young people to come in and shadow me, shadow all of my cabinet, and figure out the workings of government here in Ohio. So I would do that with half of the governor's salary. And then with the next fourth of that governor's salary, I would start town hall forums. I would fund them to bring people together to be talking about what do we need to do in Toledo, what do we need to do in Youngstown, what do we need to do in Coshocton to make those communities strong.
What point do you hope to get across in your debate with Ed Fitzgerald tonight?
That John Kasich has been bad for Ohio.
And do you feel that there will be agreement and consensus between the two of you tonight? I mean, are your
with
points,
respect to that issue,
you have points, do you have points that you intend to make that you oppose his positions?
You mean
I mean
Fitzgerald's?
Fitzgerald's.
Okay. Well, I have, I think that I have heard Ed Fitzgerald say that he's a fiscal conservative. Well, I'm not a fiscal conservative. And I think I would want to press on some of those issues that are dear to me, like the reform of the criminal justice system. I think that's having a huge impact on communities of color. And since I come from a community of color, I really want to bring it home that there's something that a governor can do about that.
And you had said that you feel that the Kasich administration has not done enough for women. What would you do specifically for women as governor?
Well, I think the Kasich administration has been very damaging to women. I lost my job last year because I worked at an abortion clinic that was closed because it could not get a transfer agreement with the hospitals there. So, you know, I know what it feels like to feel that abortion is your only choice and not feel that there is that it is an option there. And I think that the harm that does to women in Toledo, right now we have one abortion clinic left, and it has a court case. It's about to be closed down. We're doing what we can to help it to stay open. But if you look at what they did in Texas, and they say that there's only 7 clinics that are going to remain open, we're not any better than that. Our situation here in Ohio is probably worse than that in Texas when you look at access to abortions. So I think that's one way in which the Kasich administration has really, really harmed women. But I also think that when Kasich attacked all workers' rights and the right to collective bargaining, I think that affected women as well.
And I want to remind everybody, please, in your program, and I know there are pens around if you need something to write with, submit your questions, put your names on them, and they will be read by board members. Let me ask you one more question. Are you doing fundraising, and how are you doing? You have to report like everybody else does.
We do have to report. Well, we're not raising nearly as much money as Governor Kasich, I'll tell you that. We have a very modest campaign. It really is do-it-yourself politics. You know, I'm driving myself all over the state. I've put a lot of miles on my car. So we've been very frugal with our money. We have raised some money. It's not, I think, as one considers a campaign for governor, it's not very much money, but we've had a lot of people come out and support, giving us a little bit of money, $10, $20 here and there, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of all the people who have come forward and helped with this campaign in big and small ways, and I thank you all.
We are ready for our audience questions, and questioner, please identify yourself too, and then the questioner.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Ms. Rios. My name is Yvonne Honeycutt with the Human Service Chamber of Franklin County, and I'm also a proud member of the Program Planning Committee for the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm happy to ask this question on behalf of Mr. Christopher Scott. I like the idea of the single-payer healthcare system, and that is not tied to employment. How do you propose to pay for this system?
Well, as I said, I believe that we have more money in our healthcare system than any other country in the world. So I think that by and large, the money is already in the system. So I know we keep coming back to the issue of how expensive that will be. Every other wealthy country in the world has managed to do that. Canada does it. Every European country does it. Israel does it. And we can't afford it. So I think that the money is already in our system. And if we need more money in our system, I think that we should stop some of our endless war and put that money towards our healthcare system.
Thank you. I'm Alec Andrews from Ulmer and Burr, and I have a question from Ruben Herrera. What are your thoughts on the undocumented community and residents of Ohio?
I think it is very important to acknowledge the fact that we have people here who are already contributing to our communities, who are important pillars of our communities, and I would do my utmost to grant amnesty to those workers and to put in place, I know this comes from the federal government, but we actually need to have an immigration system in place that works. And that's the solution to those porous borders, not sending troops and not having Ohio State troopers enforce the ICE laws. I think we need to stop doing that. And lastly, I would hope that as a state, just to make sure that we are all safer, we would be able to have a mechanism for granting driver's license to those undocumented immigrants.
Thank you. This question, it comes from Ms. Lucianne Green. What is your stance on community corrections?
On community corrections, I think that's by and large a very good idea. However, I think it doesn't quite go far enough. I think that with our focus on things like the war on drugs, I think that we give our hardworking cops a focus that they must follow that is very misguided. So I think that along with very good solutions like that, we need to actually reform some of our laws.
We have many more questions, I think, than we have time for, but I'm going to ask this one on behalf of Tekla Lewin. What would you do to increase solar power in Ohio?
Well, as you're probably aware, the legislature is trying to go back on the requirements for renewable energies on our energy companies. I think that we need to strengthen that, and I think that instead of repealing all of those good ideas, we need to strengthen them. So that's one thing that we could do. I think we also need to increase the subsidies that people get to install solar and wind to some extent.
As I may butcher this name, Ms. Julie Keckelstein. What are other Green Party candidates have broken through, and can you talk a little bit about like maybe what states and regions for those Green Party candidates?
Well, here in Ohio, we have Bob Hart, who's in the room today, who's running for Congress. We also have Elaine Mastro-Mateo here in Ohio, who's also running for Congress. I couldn't name some of them, but we have a number of Green Party mayors and city council people in California. A few years back, we had a Green Party mayor in New Paltz, New York, and a lot of people don't realize it, but he was the first person to perform gay marriages, and he went to jail for doing that. His name was Jason West. So I think that Green Party candidates, when they get elected to office, they show what Green Party values can do and what we can accomplish.
Hi, I'm Indy Wright from Ohio State, and this is a question from Frank Eubanks. Where do you stand on Common Core educational standards?
That's a good question. I'll tell you what. I think Common Core is not going to make or break our educational system. I'm not generally in favor of it because I'm not generally in favor of any more standardized testing. But it's not the boogeyman that people make it out to be. In general, it's actually not a bad idea to have this child over here have the same standard of knowledge as this child over here, but Common Core is not going to achieve that. So I just feel like it's much ado about nothing.
Terry writes, I am very glad to hear you care about mental illness. How will you go about getting more care for unemployed mental health people?
Well, I think that comes back to the issue of our healthcare system. When we have a for-profit healthcare system, you have agencies counting bed days. That's the number of days that their client is allowed to spend in the hospital before they start getting dinged or penalized for it. And I don't think that that's a good measure of how someone is treated for a mental illness. I think that the measure of success should be, can this person function adequately in the community? And there are a lot of supports that go into making that happen. But when you do it well And when you stop counting all the nickels and dimes, you end up with a far better outcome.
This one's for me. Do you have a plan to bring more manufacturing jobs to the state of Ohio, knowing that manufacturing was instrumental in your own development and upbringing?
It is my dream to bring manufacturing to the Rust Belt, to places like my hometown of Toledo, Ohio, and I even have a name for it, Rust Belt Dreams. I tell my sons about that. I say, that used to be this, that used to be that factory. My uncle worked there, my father worked there, and I know that those factories won't hum again with building the batteries or the cars that used to be built there. But we can still manufacture things. Look at all the millions of things that we purchase from China all the time. And I think that our workers can jumpstart manufacturing. They have wonderful skills. Why can't we manufacture all of our clothing, all of our furniture, those kinds of things? Certainly we can jumpstart manufacturing, and instead of racing to the bottom by buying the cheapest, I want to say junk, but from China, but I should say junk from China, we can build entrepreneurs. I recently read an article about a factory worker who had just taken that same idea, and he, along with some other factory workers, they purchased a factory. They restarted manufacturing. I don't remember what it was they were making, but I've heard of those kinds of factories making shoes, making furniture, even doing agriculture in inner city areas. And I think that that is a place we need to start looking. And you know what? The reality of that, and I think the reason we're not doing more of that, is that nobody's going to get rich doing that. But people will become secure, and people will contribute to their communities.
A question from Doug Zimmerman. I'm concerned about the security of the voting machine. Do you support paper ballots counted at the precinct level? Sorry.
Well, I do support paper ballots, but more than anything, I support a system that is nonpartisan. I helped oversee the 2004 recount up in Lucas County. And when you go into each county board of election, they're going to have a little pin that says D or R. Now, I can't come in there and do that because mine would say G. I think it's shameful that the Democrats and the Republicans virtually own each board of elections. And supposedly they're supposed to be the counterpoint to each other and keep each other honest. But honestly, we the people own that. And we the people should demand that the partisan hats come off.
I think I have one more question. I noticed that you support stopping fracking now. Why?
I think fracking is a very dangerous venture. I think that if you have a process that is creating earthquakes in places where we never had earthquakes before, that should be a wake-up call. And also, I come from Toledo, Ohio. This past summer, we were told we couldn't drink our water, we couldn't even touch our water. And to me, that wasn't something that happened overnight. Rather, it was a disaster that was waiting to happen, that we knew was coming. I think it's the same thing with fracking. I think that's a disaster that is waiting to happen. We can be smart about it now and stop it so that we can protect our communities and protect our precious resources.
Thank you very much. And Jane, it's all yours.
Thank you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's forum. We encourage you to continue the conversation out in the hall with some coffee and some cookies. We also will remind you that you can view this program today and share it with all your on all of our forums on CTV Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates statewide through the Ohio Channel, and anytime on CMC's website via YouTube. Once more, let's thank our sponsors, Hannah News Service, the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, and the Columbus Dispatch. And let's also thank our speakers, Anita Rios and Carol Luper. And thank you all for being here. We'll see you at another CMC forum soon.
Coming up on the hour, the Columbus Metropolitan Club Governor candidate forums continue with the Republican Party candidate, John Kasich. Stay tuned.